So one thing I actually wanted to share with you guys, and maybe that's interesting for you watchers too, and I'm curious also what you guys are doing, because we get a lot of questions recently from just my personal network, but also from customers on how to recruit talent and the big question of talent. So once you break through the ceiling of being able to do your lead management and sales, right, for complex products and services, then at some point you eventually want to step out of the sales process as a founder and find people who do this for you, right? And it's a pretty normal process. And the main thing, we have this in a ton of YouTube videos we can link below. Do not do this too early. Do not delegate sales too early, because it's very important that you master it and don't expect somebody else to figure this out for you. We see this a ton. But once you're ready and actually understand, okay, my script is ready, and you've closed 20 to 50 units by yourself, then it's definitely worth pursuing looking at how to find talent. And that is normally expensive, dragging. It takes a ton of time. When we hired the first people like Levin and Dennis, I think I was out for 1.5 months just recruiting, and it's very, very daunting because it's very similar to the sales process. So what we came up with like a ton of influence from other people. This is not only ours, but like we made it ours. We learned from people like, I think Nick Kozmin, he has some great stuff out there, but then also from Google. There's one book which I recommend, How Google Works in the Recruiting Process. And we kind of made it our own to actually fit the current environment in Germany and Europe. How to get great talent, but also eventually that's scalable internationally. We will see. But one thing I like to share here is actually this recruiting process, and we call it the high potential B2B sales team recruiting process. And it's basically split in those 3 areas, and that's something what most people don't do in the beginning, and that's why they get like clawed into all of the different phases of the process, and that's why it takes so long and it's so daunting. So we call them normally talent acquisition, talent recruiting, and talent closing. And you might recognize those 3 terminologies because it's very similar to sales, right? Because recruiting is like sales. For those people who don't believe recruiting is not like sales or similar to a sales process, guys, really get into this topic and just accept that recruiting is like sales. You're selling a position to an individual who is a fit for your company, of course, right? But you are the person as an entrepreneur who has to position that role in front of an individual and make it appealing for them, right? And especially if you want high talent, who right now we have a war for talent, right? There's not enough talent out there. Especially in a market where it's essentially a buyer's market, right? So where the recruitee is the person who decides what they want to do with their life. You need to get into selling those those positions, right? And make them as great as possible. So that's why we call those acquisition, recruiting, and closing. So in acquisition, what does that mean? So acquisition works very, very similarly to the sales process. It's basically lead gen, right? Or prospecting. So what we do here is we have one LinkedIn automation running that works with actually outbound messaging to people. We have, of course, network and recommendation. Sorry for the typo here. So people reach us via our network. Like we have some people from Copenhagen Business School, which were my alma mater because they have been in the same course, but a couple of years later. Or we have people who approach me and say like, hey, I heard from a friend you're doing this with ComX. I'm currently looking for a job. Can I enter the recruiting process? So that's quite common. And then, of course, what we also do since recently, we actually run paid ads, and they work exactly the same way as our paid ads we run for our own business to promote our product. It's just basically optimized towards the people we want to attract to our business. So in our case, this is for the growth consulting sales roles. Okay. So all of those 3 here actually go to a landing page. Yes, we also work with landing pages here. Okay. And on this landing page, this is actually very important. We have a pretty normal funnel page. It's not that advanced, but what we work with a lot, as you see here, is video, because video is basically a scalable format where you can bring your message across and get people to know you, right? It never sleeps. It doesn't have to take lunch breaks. It's just there. And we have a video here where we just fully transparently from the first second basically explain what people can earn, who the team is, right? Why this is relevant, what experiences we've made with the team. We introduce ourselves as co-founders, okay, so people know what we're up to. We talk about the solution, we talk about our case studies, we talk about the training program. All of the stuff is in this video, and it just explains everything that you would normally do in a pre-recruiting call, okay? So we do this, and afterwards we ask people to fill out a form, okay? where this is just a normal form that people would fill out, apply here, right? And you have the same on LinkedIn partly, right? It's just about, okay, who are you, right? Do you basically can give a quick introduction to you? What have you done in the past, right? What makes you interested about ComX? And we collect those things afterwards to understand, okay, who do we want to invite for our next step, okay? So those are all like small recruiting steps. So we also have a recruiting team right now that detects, okay, if there's a great fit, we have normally listed what makes a great candidate. If there's a great fit, can we send personalization emails afterwards where we follow up with them, right? And we basically, after they fill the form out, we're gonna invite them to the next step, which is a group interview. And this is really the part where the recruiting starts. You know, if you have candidates who are interested, how to get them over the fence, how to get them on board. Okay, so I've mentioned earlier that we work a lot with video, and the big chunk here, the big secret, right, how to actually automate your acquisition process is really through video, and just have that on the website. The big chunk in recruiting that we had is actually we started inviting people to group sessions. I just had one yesterday. I think it's always a lot of fun. I get to meet a ton of great talent. And what normally the process was, and we had the same process at Google, was that you have a recruiter and they do one-on-one sessions pitching the position to each individual person, and then check if they are a fit, and then eventually inviting them to the in-person one-on-one interviews, right? So that's a classical recruitment step. We had this at Google in Dublin. There were like hundreds of recruiters doing this all the freaking time, and they had one-on-one screening where they were asking people those couple of questions, then pitching this the position, and then people would be invited to a one-on-one interview. There's nothing against this. We did this at ComX in the beginning of 2020 as well, but if you do not have a massive recruiting team like Google, this takes so much time. Like you have to, like at minimum 20 to 15, 20 to 30 minute calls with each and every single candidate. Then you have to do all the admin afterwards. You have to take notes and all of that stuff. And at some point, and this was heavily inspired by actually Nick Kozmin, crazy recruiter, we just said like, okay, why don't we invite them to group sessions, right? And we do this on Zoom. We don't do that like crazy big group session, and it's kind of like a group call. This was also heavily inspired by our team huddles, right? Where we just, or by our internal team meetings, where we said like, okay, what makes those group calls actually pleasant? And we structure those in a way where we invite them to the Zoom call, we check if they actually confirm the event, and we actually push also like that they have to confirm the event on the date again, right? So that we don't waste our resources. And what we do then in the group interview, which happens normally each Monday or Wednesday at 5 p.m., we actually just run them through the positions again, right? So similar presentation to what we have already on the hiring page, but this time, sorry if the hiring page here, right? But this time, we actually have people ask all the questions they desire. And this can be very, very scary in the beginning because like you feel like, oh, maybe I'm hiding something. But the point is really open questions or FAQs or Q&As with a live audience will push you to have a great position ready for them, right? So you mustn't be afraid of that. If there's something you feel like hiding, maybe you shouldn't be hiding stuff, okay? If there's something about the salary you don't like to tell them, maybe you haven't figured out your full salary structure yet, right? If there's something which is very, very hard about your job you don't like to tell people in the beginning, you should definitely tell people that in the beginning, right? Because everything is just about expectation setting. So I really do recommend to have group sessions, put yourself on the hot chair for once, okay? And have people answer all the questions they have, right? It's gonna show you very quickly what's pleasant about your company to work and what's not so pleasant, and where you maybe say, hey, this is not pleasant, but we do it anyways, and just accept that people don't like it. Or areas where you feel like actually, oh, wow, that's very true. This is not great. We have to improve this. So we do those sessions with 10 to 15 people a week. And we have them introduce themselves, then we have a couple of questions for them, and then it's mostly Q&A. So what happens in the end of this group interview? We ask people to give us something. Now we went very much ahead, right? We prepaid, we went into the principle of reciprocity, right? And gave them all the information on the job. They know now what they can earn, they know how the training looks like, and the next step is really that we want something from them in order to get commitment, because without commitment, you have no shows for your interviews. You have people who come to the interviews but are just window shoppers. You have people who come unprepared to the interviews, right? So that's why we ask for something from them. And what we ask here in the end of the interview are two things. Number one, if you're interested, guys, please send us a letter of motivation, a proper letter of motivation within the next 24 hours. And if you are really interested, please send us your CV in the next 24 hours. And this is actually one thing we learned a lot. The people who are really keen, they will do this. Then there's a couple of people who simply don't have the time. They will tell you, oh, Phil, shame, man, I have some work tonight. Can I also send this to you in 2 to 3 days? And yes, of course, you accept that, right? Because you don't know what like situation or life situation candidates are in. So of course you understand that. But the main thing is really they tell you straight away if they're really interested. And then you have people who tell you, yes, I'm totally going to send you my CV and motivation letter, and you never hear from them, right? And that's normally the part where people are just like, oh, should I follow up? And what about this great candidate and stuff? And yes, you should do some follow-ups there. But the point is you should be happy that you know straight away that those people are actually not interested. It's just like sales, okay? Because they're never going to close on you anyway. They're never going to join your company anyway. And you want to know right now who's really sincere and who's not. Okay, so we use this a lot as a gate. If the candidate does not send the CV or motivation letter, right, we follow up with the high potentials. And otherwise, we just disregard them, move on, right? Move on with our lives. They're just not in the right spot, and that's completely fine, but we cannot effort our energy towards them, okay? Then what we do is we review the application. So there's really just a review process where Dennis, for example, who's our sales manager here, reviews all the candidates. We have a screening where we say candidates have must-haves and nice-to-haves, and if they fit in, they're in. If they're not, they can fit in. If they're a little bit of a corner case and oddball, we sometimes invite them because we like to expand our knowledge about potential candidates. But mostly, we know exactly what we want here, okay? And then we look at the motivational letter, right, and see if they're like for growth consulting, for example, you have to be quite well spoken. You're in front of people a lot. You do a lot of sales, but you also do a lot of consulting. So if people are not well written at all, right, that's an indication that it might not be a good fit. But if they are, we start inviting them to the interview process. And the one-on-one interview process is really, we actually just used the one that we had from Google, and I spoke about this in previous videos. We have a format where we have 2 hours, where at least 2 people of the company are present, where at least 1 person from the team is present. So Chris and I, as co-founders, are not allowed to do interviews together. And 2 people from the team actually have to come from different teams as well, right? So if Levin is in there from customer success, he has to choose somebody from sales or marketing. Right? If I'm in there, I cannot choose Chris. I have to choose somebody from customer success as well who's not a manager, right? So we try to do this, like we try to move this up as much as possible. Also get males, females involved into the interview process to, number one, make the candidate more comfortable, but also number 2, to avoid biases, right? Because sometimes we just really want to avoid silos in ComX. And that's why we mix up the interview panel who does the interview as much as possible. And in the interview is a 2-hour format. We have 4 sections, right? I've been talking about this a lot. The first one is really according to the Google framework, GCA, General Cognitive Ability. People do a test there, a data test, right? The second thing is we're going to do role-related knowledge. Role-related knowledge consists of a case study they have to prepare, but also, for example, in sales, they have to actually do an elevator pitch and do a role play. And then we have 2 areas which are quite unorthodox, but people who have been, I don't know, interviewing with bigger consulting firms or who have been in American interview processes know this. Those are situational-based questions. So situational-based questions means, dear Finn, please remember a situation where you had to face X, Y, and Z. Please give me an example how that went, right? So you bring people into the position of scenarios where they have to explain how would they act or how did they act in a given situation. And we call this number 1 is leadership, where we normally ask about the work people have done in the past and also especially the team dynamics they have done. And the second one is actually, we call it the spark. At Google, we called it googliness. And the spark is really something where it's not about work at all, but there we really go deep and really want to understand mostly what is the motivation of that person. What drives that person? Is she into only making money? Is he into a career where he feels supported and can get to the next level? Do they just want to get out of their job and actually don't have a plan, right? All of those 3 scenarios are fine, but we want to understand the context of their application. We want to understand what really drives them. And by that, really understand, hey, is ComX a fit or not? This is really about like us putting ourselves in their shoes and understanding, can they be successful here? And the spark is one of the main things we really watch out for. It's really the cultural, other people call it cultural fit. We call it spark, what like sparks people. And this is something we take super serious, and there's no right or wrong. It's just sometimes there's just a fit or not a fit. And yeah, we do this for 2 hours. It's pretty intense, but it's also fun. We get to meet a lot of people. We got the feedback that this process is also quite convenient because people really can get to know the team. And what we do afterwards is we look at the candidate has to succeed in at least 3 out of those 4 areas. So there's kind of a pass and fail mechanism in there. And if they are below that, right, then we cannot let them further. Or if they succeed in 3 out of 4 areas, but there is a red flag where we say like, that sounds pretty weird, or I really didn't like the vibe of that person. I cannot see myself traveling with that person. I'm not so sure, right? Then we actually have to say no sometimes. So one thing we actually, and what I also recommend you guys to do, because I think it's just fair, and everybody who has been applying for a job and didn't get any feedback will confirm this. Not getting feedback after you put time into an interview really sucks. So in case there's a no, please do not let people wait that long, right? We try to give feedback within 72 hours later. And what we do is also we don't write an email with a straight no, but we actually send an email with an explainer video or give people a call and explain, look, here were 4 sections. We expected this in this section. We observed you rather did X, Y, and Z. We would have liked to see this. Therefore, you didn't make it through this section, and that's the reason for it. If you like to learn more about this section, we recommend you following literature or like certain things, right? So we try to be very direct, but also very concrete with the feedback, so people can actually, if they're interested, work on that and also understand why really, they didn't make it. I think the worst part about like young applicants not getting a why they didn't make it in is just completely destructive. I think it just crashes motivation for people. It's very unfair because they've spent time with you and your company and your case eventually, and you actually just not helping. And if we have people spending time with us, we at least like to help them get better, right, in that field. And we hope also that through that process they get the dream job they want afterwards, even if it's not ComX. Okay, so everything afterwards is actually just confirmation stuff, really just collecting all the deeds. And then moving into onboarding.
Sag mal, Andreas, war's das jetzt?
Ja, das war's. Beziehungsweise noch eine Sache, das Outro fehlt.
Ah ja, okay. Wenn dir dieses Video gefallen hat, dann abonniere unseren Kanal und drück die Glocke, sodass du kein Video mehr in der Zukunft verpasst. Wenn du irgendwelche Fragen hast, dann sende uns die direkt in einen Kommentar unter diesem Video. Hast du das, Marc?
Ja.
Okay.
Cool.